Hello, everyone. I just wanted to talk a little bit about families, and particularly families who have children with multiple severe disabilities. I think they make up a unique subset. Not that all families are not alike in many ways, but that the kinds of care that are often needed, the kinds of decisions that often need to be made, are unique to parents who have children with severe disabilities. So I think it's very important that we understand families, how we work with families effectively, and how we promote, and this to me is like most important, is how we promote the autonomy of the family to carry on for themselves. Okay? Because in essence, they're in a lifelong journey in many cases, meaning that oftentimes children that we see with severe disabilities have lifelong needs that are going to involve the family to a great degree. So we want them to find their self confidence, we want them to understand and discover their competencies so that together we can do the kinds of work that is necessary to support a student with a severe disability, and also independently they can carry on the tasks that the school has worked on with the strategies that we've provided with support from other people, etc., to carry on that journey because it can be really quite difficult. I first want to say that it's important, I believe, to look at families as families first. And oftentimes, I find that we don't do that. We look at like the autistic family or the Down syndrome family, and I don't mean that we literally think of it that way, but we see the family in light of of the child with a disability. And because of that, I think we tend to treat families as if they maybe are pathological themselves. And it really causes early on a real distance between people who are there to support the family and the families themselves. I know this because I've been told it many times that people feel like when they went in the door, they were treated like they were disabled. I guess that's the best way to put it, but they were disabled. The point that they were trying to make to me, I'm talking, over the years, the point that families have tried to make to me is that, they had, okay, let me back up a second. Here's the point. Families who have had a child with a disability, who came second or third or further down in the line of kids, have told me that they were treated differently when they took their child with a disability to doctors and service providers than they were when they took their typically developing children. That's what I'm trying to say about being treated like you're disabled. The point that I'm making is that when we deal with children who are typically developing, we tend to put a lot of emphasis on strengths. We tend to talk about things in typical ways. But when families walk into the world of disability, things become different. We start using all those acronyms. We start talking about different kinds of labels, diagnoses, et cetera, et cetera. And all those things are necessary for us to discuss, and they certainly guide our work. But we want to let families be families first. So I always say, I hope it's not a bad joke or some kind of thing, but, I always say that when a young couple is walking down the aisle on the way to the altar to be married, they don't look at each other glowingly and say, I hope we have 3 kids with spina bifida. That, that's never the dream, at least that I know of. And people dream. A good book that you might want to check out is written by, Galinsky is her last name. Why can't I think of her first name? Galinsky. It's on the stages of parenting. So if you just put in Galinsky stages of parenting, you'll get it. You can find it. It's an old book. It's been out for a very long time. But it basically tracks the way parents develop over the course of the life of the child. Okay? But what's interesting to me, and it was something that I was not really aware of as a stage in parenting is when Galinsky starts her book with a chapter called Image Making. And wow, was that powerful for me. Image making is what I was saying a moment ago. You don't go down the aisle saying, let's have three children with spina bifida. That's not, the way it works. We build images that are, I don't know, whatever we want. I know we say things like we want I'm not a parent, I shouldn't say, but I hear parents, I just want them to be happy and healthy and stuff. But generally they have some notion of like, gosh, I hope she likes to play baseball, or wouldn't it be cool if he wanted to be in the family business, or whatever. Those images are going on early on, and they go on for all of us. Okay, I just mentioned that I don't have children, but I have been on the bus before where I've seen a parent who is disciplining a child in a way that I think isn't very good, right? And I put myself right in the picture, and I think, well, now if that was my child, that's image making. What I just did, you could just say, okay, it was just you thinking in your head, and be like, but what I did is I put myself in the role of father and how I, as a father, would react to what was occurring in front of me. Okay? So we all do image making all the time. Parents have all kinds of reasons for creating the images that they create. And I'm trying to think about how to say this, just because I want to be clear. I'm not saying exactly there's negative images, but there are some images that serve families better than others, meaning, the image of a child who's happy and healthy is different than the image of a child who has a $1 million business. Let's just say that. I'm not saying it's wrong about the $1 million business. I'm just saying some things tend to be more global, shared, things that we all want for our families, etc. And so when we're looking at families' images, it's important to never question why you get what you get. Okay, because to me, to think, I want my kid to make $1 million is a dumb image, but somebody that might be perfectly acceptable and appropriate, maybe the way the family thinks, I don't know. But I have just learned that people have images for all sorts of reasons, and they're usually tied very, very deeply into their own psyche, the way they see themselves as a father or mother, the way they see themselves within the family and the family unit. These things are really important for families, and many of you, if you have children, already know what I'm talking about. Because families do want to be respected, and they want people to look at them with respect. And frankly, oftentimes disability just throws a monkey wrench into that, okay? I'll give you a quick example of a woman who was just talking about how hard it was, a mother, right? How hard it was to take her son to Mass because he had autism, and they had always gone to church as a family. She felt that was really important. She wanted him in the Mass, blah, blah, blah. But, he would start screaming out and doing all these other kinds of things, and then she would get embarrassed, and she got a few dirty looks, and, because as you guys probably know, I don't know the child, but if he was typical looking at all, everybody thinks it's bad parenting. So anyway, that leads me to my next point, which is stop blaming parents. Part of the problem that parents bring to me all the time is being blamed. Like, things don't work out because they don't know how to do it, they didn't try hard enough, they didn't, whatever. And it's a really easy thing for us to do, to blame parents. And oftentimes we blame parents. This is my opinion, or an experience. Oftentimes we blame parents when we don't know what to do, when we're lost, when we're in over our heads, So when things get difficult and maybe, there's some conflict or things aren't working out or whatever, it gets really easy to blame the family, especially if the family has any dysfunction, or, I hate to say this, but at a lower class. I've seen that too. It's kind of like, well, they're so dumb. It's just written off. And I that could be any race or ethnicity, by the way. I've heard people kind of write off families who aren't as educated and things like that. So family blaming really, really sucks. You really don't want to do it. And I just know that it's easy to do. Because, well, I'll give you an example as to how I know that. I was working in a center, and there was a kid who had some really difficult behaviors. And honestly, I never worked with him, so I don't even know what they were. But he was having a particularly difficult session. And I was asking the people, there are these, oh, I didn't go through that part. I was working at this center. I didn't work with this kid. He was in a session. He was acting really crazy. And we had, this is the main part, we had 4 or 5 pediatric residents. These are medical doctors who were working in pediatrics now. And they came in and they were in an observation booth, and I was asking some things, about some diagnostic stuff. And I knew at the time what was going on with the kid, and I was just trying to query them around, like, could they kind of figure out, like, what the deal was. And nobody could kind of figure out what it was. And this woman, and I was surprised it was a woman, maybe that's sexist, but I was surprised, said, well, if you ask me, this is a problem with the mother. And then suddenly everyone's like, well, yeah, she certainly can't man. And it turned into, let's have a total bitch fest on the mother. These are MDs, okay? These are not uneducated people. But when they couldn't figure out what's going on, it was the mother. It was the mother, as they say a lot of times in movies. It was the mother. And parents really sense that judgment. And they've got very good radar about that. I one time was talking to a group of mothers, was at this meeting, and they were talking about how stupid their IEP team was or something. And I'm like, what do you mean we're stupid? And they said, oh, they always act really nice, and they think we think they like us, but we know they don't, and blah blah blah. And she went through this whole long thing, and she goes, and this is how we play them. I was kind of stunned, really, I was. But what she was saying ultimately was, we're not doing the blame game. So if that means we need to get in charge, then we will. Which, by the way, little tangent, I think that's how we've gotten where we are these days with, all the litigation, lawyers at the meetings and all this other kind of stuff. I do think that many school districts did and still do take advantage of parents. And they make decisions that... when I say they're illegal, I don't mean they're not serving the kid, but you already have the placement determined, talk the parents into it because they need to fill a seat over wherever. So not really honoring least restrictive environment and things like that. So these things go on all over the place, and I think it's because we blamed parents. I really do. We turned them, kind of into the arch enemy. One of the things I can't stand, when I hear people say it, is something like, well, all we have to do is get a signature. Now, ultimately, I think that's good. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you do. You want to come to agreement, and signature means we've come to agreement. I'll give you that. But it's almost said like, whatever it takes, we just have to get a signature. Whatever it gives, we have to get it. We have to get a signature. And there's a certain degree to which I don't know why that bothers me, but it just feels like somehow the family has been sold out or shortchanged in some kind of way. And so, just this notion of blame or feeling blamed, leading to feeling distant, is an incredibly important thing to think about, because it really has a lot to do with the relationships that we develop with families. And by the way, this is one thing that was always hard for me to deal with, is when people would come in and kind of put on me like I was blaming them or judging them. Among other things, I'll just use this example though. I mean, I would get really defensive because I would be like, I'm not like that. It's not how I want to be and all that stuff. Okay. Well, first of all, I was like that a little bit. I think we all are. You're frustrated. You can't get this kid to do whatever, and the family can't even send a note back or whatever. It gets hard at that point not to blame, right? But what I found out is that I was assuming or absorbing the years for which people have been treated that way. So they come in very well defended, right? It's like, this might be another blamer. This might be somebody who really wants to, hold on to the decision making. This might be somebody who thinks he knows everything. So I have a funny story about that, in that when I started working with families in social work in an early intervention program, I had talked to the director about my not having kids, and I said, I'm so worried that, like, people are like, well, what the hell do you know? Like, you don't have kids. Okay, I was really nervous about it, worried about it. The first client I had said, "Do you have kids?" Like that. "Do you have kids?" And I literally about needed a diaper. I thought, I can't even believe I didn't get out of the gate. So my answer was going to be, no, I don't. However, and I was just going to talk about a little bit about, like, I've studied development, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, I don't. And that's all I said. And she said, oh, thank God. Because then you're not going to tell me how you raised your kids and did it right. I couldn't believe it. That's another thing I found out, was a lot of counselors and stuff would tell parents how to raise their kids based upon how they did it. She was delighted I didn't have any experience because I wasn't going to use it against her. I mean, how crazy is that? Okay, but it's an interesting way to look at it, right? Now, when we deal with parents who have kids at this level of development, you also want to just be sensitive to the fact that oftentimes they have taken on way more than they feel and sometimes are capable of doing. I mean, whether it be a medically fragile child, whether it be a child with terrible behavioral outbursts and things like that, they oftentimes now have on their list of things, psychiatry or the counseling group, the play group, the OT, the whatever. They have a whole list of things that they have to do. And that's one reason I always tell teachers to be respectful that these families are really busy, and to look at these families as if they were your own. And what I mean by that is, if I came into one of your houses and said, this is what you really should be doing if you want your child to, and you'd be like, who the... Okay? Think of it that way. So think about the fact that oftentimes when we're coming in with something, it is intrusive to them because they are already overloaded. And so sometimes just the simplest thing that we do kind of tips the card over. So it's just an idea for you to think about that in terms of why families might be resistant to taking things on, or also in your own work, being sensitive to that so that you don't give people too much to do. One thing that I wish I had thought about this. I don't know if I can find anything on this or not, but in early intervention work, they talk about working within the rhythms and routines of the family. And so I'm just trying to come up with something simple. But I mean, just using laundry, for example, when we talk about rhythms and routines, let's say that you're working on color discrimination and you really need, the child really needs to work on that. Instead of sending the family homework, think of all the places that they can do color discrimination, right? They may put big colors on the hot and cold water. Maybe the child can help with the laundry, and they have different colors for different, underwear is blue and something else, not brown. Those kinds of things. Those are the things that families have always said to me really work best. Because when they are working at home and they're working with what they have that needs to be done and is around them, if they can incorporate that into something where they're helping the child or young adult, in that, depending, that is always not just easier for them to do, but it's more normative. It's not stopping the whole day to go do a worksheet or something like that. Okay, so I'll try to find something on that and post it if I can on working through rhythms and routines, and that it's in the family home. I should know where to get it, but I'm not sure right now. All right, I'll quit obsessing about it on live. Then I guess the last thing that I want to talk about is the fact that when we are helping families make decisions, it's really important for you to think about the fact that hopes and dreams are essential to making certain that the things that we do are accepted and embraced. That's what we really want by the family. Okay? So what I mean by hopes and dreams is that the more we can make efforts come to fruition that align a person as closely with the family as we can through our supports, then we have really done our job. We've done our job well. Okay? I mean, I'll say about a guy that I worked with in, I didn't work with him directly, but when I was working in Virginia, I knew about him, who came from a long line of firefighters and really wanted to be a firefighter and had really pretty significant cognitive delay, right? But took a job at a fire station to wash sheets, I believe, or cook. The things that are needed in the firehouse, he helped out. And so, in a sense, the integrity of the family line came together because they'd all been firefighters, and he absolutely loved that job. I had a client back in Virginia who had Down syndrome. Now, he was a bit higher cognitively than maybe some of the students that you would work with, that this course focuses on. But he was still, had significant challenges. And he wanted to be a lawyer. That's all he wanted to be, was a lawyer. So got him a job in a law firm, and he was a clerk. And so in his job there, like a file clerk, and in his job there, he basically took all kinds of stuff, filed them somewhere. I don't know what he did, but he had a job that he really enjoyed. And this is the embarrassing part that I'll tell you. This is where I felt stupid. He invited me to the company Christmas party, and he showed me this check for like 600 some bucks, and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, what's that? And he goes, that's my bonus. Like law firms do that, end of year bonus. That's my bonus. And I'm like, really? And I'm like, how come you got a bonus? And he goes, because I work here. I'm not kidding. Literally, I'm like, why did the guy with Down syndrome get a bonus? He's not a lawyer. It was kind of embarrassing, right? Because I just hadn't thought about it. Granted, I will say I didn't maybe know that everybody in a law firm got a bonus, which I know now. But there was a degree to which, why would you get a bonus? As if like somehow he wasn't an employee of the firm. These things are hard to get over. They really are. Like, we all have to move past it. We have to move past what we think people can or can't do and all that sort of stuff. And that's what really parents want us to do. Parents really, hold on to those early image-making kinds of hopes and dreams through all of their lives. It's been my experience, okay? And we can't always make it work, but we can do our best to make it work. And that's why I think it's so important to find out from families, who do you think Carol is, or how you and Bobby hang out? What's that about? Getting to know the really interesting parts of their lives, getting to know the strengths that they have. And by that, we measure strengths all the time on assessment and stuff. But when you see people live, you oftentimes see all kinds of things that they do well, things that they enjoy, environments that they work best in. And all of those things help you know the child better, but they really are of great benefit to the family because they want these children becoming adults to fit in to the family life. So I know a lot of what I've been talking about right now has had less to do with the specifics, maybe, of working with families. This has to do with really, I believe, the goal that I have when people leave is that you embrace families and that you don't do anything to separate yourself from families. You do everything you can to make that relationship and that bond a strong alliance. That doesn't mean you have to like each other. It just means make it a strong alliance, because the stronger the alliance, the more effective things are going to be. The woman who trained me as a social worker, I went down one day and I was working with this family, and they were absolutely, the parents were nuts, and I felt so sorry for the kid, and I went down and I said, this family is so crazy, something has to be done here, blah 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 blah. And she said, well, call CPS, or here you got DCFS, call DCFS. And I said, well, I can't. There's nothing to report. And she goes, well, then those are the best parents he has. So get back to work. I've never forgotten that. Those are the best parents he has. You really like that kid? Then you need to work even harder when you don't like their parents, is what I found. Because a lot of times they need us. Yeah, I'm not talking about just personality. I'm talking about difficult parents and stuff that are really, difficult for the child as well. So anyway, learning that and understanding that we have to just dig back in was really very important to me. And it was really a better way for me to organize my own thinking around my frustration, which tends to come up in this population of students quite often because it's a very difficult and a very, very demanding population of students to serve. One day, I went to meet with a family and about their son who had just been born, and he has Down syndrome, and the family was very cold, kind of almost off-putting. Like, I could tell they really did not want me to be there. They wanted the services, but they didn't really want me to be there. And I got the sense that this has been really difficult for them, accepting this child's disability. So this was an early intervention, so, baby, even at that level, we start with parents' hopes and dreams, right? The image making. And I was talking about hopes and dreams. And the dad said that his dream would be that his son was the quarterback for Florida State Seminoles. And so I took a risk. I like college football, and that weekend, Notre Dame had beat the Seminoles, like Florida State, but like a point in the last minute. I mean, second, something like that. It was really like one of those games. So anyway, I said, well, I don't know. I said, my sense is he's going to disappoint you, and he's going to go play for Notre Dame, and we know we hate them. And he just cracked up laughing. And I said, no, I got this. And I started to write it down. And he said, you don't have to write it down. You don't have to write it down. And I said, well, I can if you want. He said, no, and I'll never forget this. I wish I had it on tape. He said, no, I just don't want you telling me what the dreams are for my child. I'll tell you. So I took that to heart. And I have thought about that so many times later, where maybe I've limited someone's dreams, or I've jumped the gun on something, made assumptions about something that weren't fair in terms of the student. And in this situation, it's so easy to do because we have so much. It's so necessary for us to act on people in this population by maneuvering their bodies, helping them feed, those sorts of things, that it gets really easy to forget that we're dealing with people and that they have unique ways of doing things and their families have unique lenses for seeing them. And those images that were made long ago and the hopes and dreams that are still alive are things that we're trying to hopefully bring to fruition in the work that we do with them in the classroom. Thanks.